Hey, what's good? What's good with all the people out there? This is Thawahgabar for Black Authentic Truth, man. I got a excellent live conversation with no other than Commanding General YAHANNA. We're about to get into it. If you've seen the thumbnail, you've seen it correctly. We're about to talk about Hebrew Israelites, and we're going to talk about that impending war. So it's my pleasure to introduce Commanding General YAHANNA up in the building. How you doing?
Shalom. Pretty good. Shalom.
Yeah, so I got so many questions I want to ask you. First, what I want to do is get into, you know, a lot of people hear about Hebrew Israelites. They don't know nothing about it. They probably seen us. They probably seen brothers on the corner. You know, everybody has that stereotype, and definitely heard of the ISUPK and heard of you. So what I want to do is I just want to, you know, ask you a little bit about yourself. Just give me a little bit about yourself. How did you, you know, become Commander General YAHANNA? Your upbringing, you know, if you could.
Okay. Well, I grew up in the hood. I grew up in the project. You know what I mean? In the rough part of the town in the Bronx. You know what I mean? But I had an amazingly excellent mother. And a mother that had high morals, was very astute at taking care of her children, suffered long for us, you know, and tried to keep us on the straight and narrow, you know what I mean? And and for the most part, she did a good job. She did an excellent job. And being in New York City, you know, I often traveled to Harlem and eventually found the brothers who we call today the chief head priests, who were teaching on 1 West 125th Street, and then joined the Hebrew Israelites. I was, I think I was 18 or 19 at the time.
Wow.
A young man, you know, way back in the days. And I got into the groove and worked for years building camps and teaching and spreading this gospel and working with other brothers and sisters and pushing this truth everywhere. And then shortly before the year 2000, we had a big shakeup in the school. I mean, a big shakeup in the school. Other people came in and convinced other brothers of certain things and had them, you know, sort of divert from the truth into something else. And the Lord had me hold on to the truth. I'm giving you the short version. The Lord had me hold on to the truth. And basically the rest became history. I held on to it with the great help of General Muhammad, General Maka'ala, General Hazayan, and the other generals who eventually warred with me on the streets to carry on this truth. And the Lord blessed us. And next thing you know, here we are today.
Right. So that's amazing. And just for the people that's, you know, because my platform is, you know, it's Black people from different ideologies and different walks of life. And I wanted to expose them to the truth of, you know, Hebrew Israelites and how this thing came to be. I profess a lot of times on my channel that's what I am. And I'm a part of the ISUPK. Of course, that is not how I connect to these people. I talk about things that we all can agree upon. One of the things that we can all agree upon is the history of how our people have been treated. And so when it comes to this truth, I first heard about this truth coming from slaves. So if you could go in a little bit about the history of how the truth, this knowledge of that, you know, Black people are God's chosen people, real briefly, how did it come to fruition?
Okay. Let me, if I could, let me spin it way back to the 1500s and the 1400s,
Okay.
when the first explorers came over to the United States. When the first explorers came over to the United States, even before Columbus, they engaged with the Caribbean first. And in the Caribbean, they realized that them, in many cases, being from the Catholic Church, so having a form of religion, they realized that the people they were talking to in many cases spoke Hebrew. And more importantly, they dressed like Hebrew. And so they began to realize that they had found the lost 12 tribes of Israel. A very, very important book that people can look up to is called Lost Tribes and Promised Land. It is a historical record that accounts, excuse me, in part for the discovery of these Hebrew Israelites in the islands of Puerto Rico and the islands of the Dominican Republic and different areas. So this information was transferred also to the slaves when they began to come over during the transatlantic slave trade in the 1620s. So the slaves that came over knew who they were, got together with those that were enslaved both in the Caribbean and in the South, and specifically in the crossroads of Florida, among the so-called Seminole Indians, who had connections with the Caribbean and connections with the traditional transatlantic slaves into the South. And as a result from that, several of those brothers and sisters held on to the understanding that they were Hebrew Israelites. One of those was a brother that we call today Abba Bibbins. And he coming up from Florida, and also the great, great, great man Yaquab, one of the three that founded the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Yaquab also, being in that area, knew this information and came north with this information. The white Jews now this is all around the 20s and 30s, 1920s, 1930s, in the whole era of emancipation and freedom for blacks. Blacks began to go and look into their history and find out more about what they, where they came from, and then discovered this information. So during that time, the 20s and 30s, they began to start to migrate north and look into blacks and others in the north. And what they had discovered was that the white Jews who had synagogues in places like New York City had began to start a sort of proselytizing program in the 1900s. And this can be found in the museums like the Schomburg and other museums. You can find the history of so-called Black Judaism in places like Harlem. Like one of the first Black synagogues was set up in Harlem and other places. Now, these were synagogues that were run by the white Jews, or how can I put it, like founded and orchestrated and set up. So basically you walked into this synagogue, you learned everything the white Jews learned, but you learned that blacks were converts to Judaism in these synagogues. This was sort of their program. And then in the 60s, in the early 60s or so, the same brother, our Bibbins, discovered in the records that we were in fact not converts to Judaism, but that we were in fact the descendants of the Jews. He then commissioned several brothers to get together and research it. And these brothers included Chief Head Priest Ariah and others, and discovered, yes, indeed, that we were not converts to Judaism, but that we were the bloodline of these lost 12 tribes. This, of course, created a big stir and a big controversy. And as a result, Bibbins separated from the other Hebrew Israelites that were still following that traditional way. He eventually got killed in 1960, in the 60s. I don't want to get I don't want to get the year wrong, but he eventually was killed by a Muslim group in New Jersey. At that time, he turned, after his death, Then 3 we call pioneers or part of the 7, Marsha, Yaquab, and Ariah. They moved from where the Book of Torah, which was Abba Bibbins' school, around the corner to 1 West 125th Street, and opened up the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. From there, we ride that river all the way up until Commanding General YAHANNA.
Okay, excellent.
That's the long history of how we got to this point.
Excellent.
But a very rich history.
Yes, indeed. Now, when I first heard that this came from slaves, I did my own research, and I wanted to know, because I have an inquiring mind, and I said, well, if our people came to West Africa, there has to be some evidence of, Hebraisms are that way of life. There's a couple of books. There's a book called Bambara that I came across. Well, first of all, there's a book called, I believe the name of it is Race and Americanization, Louisiana and Creole. And it talks about how the slaves, the main companies that took slaves from West Africa, took about 2/3 of them from a specific area of Africa called Bambara. And so, and they went to Louisiana, and I started to research these people, and these people, they lived a pastoral life. They wore fringes. Their women wore, head wraps. And there's another book by a Jewish man, so-called Jew, that he lived out there for a while with them, learning the languages, and he discovered that the Bambara language had Hebrew words in it. Hebrew words dating to the time of Abraham, words that were used during the time of Abraham. And there's just so much more. There's a brother, I should say this brother, his name is Ishmael Diadi. He lived in Timbuktu. He was in possession of about 300 manuscripts, some in Aramaic, some in Spanish, and some in Hebrew. He says his forefathers came to Timbuktu after the expulsion of the Jews. His great-great-grandfather lived in Toledo, Spain, and he looks just like any black man in America. He claims to be, a descendant of the Jews that were expelled out of Spain and went into the interiors of Africa. So there's a lot of evidence that shows that, the people that came on transatlantic slave trade, they are God's chosen people. And I just wanted to add to that, to what you had said. And also, before we go on, sir, I just want to say, any brothers and sisters that's watching this live, please like and share the live so more people can get in and hear this conversation. So what I want to ask is, you said earlier that it was very controversial to say that we were God's chosen people, to say that we were the real Jews. It was a very controversial thing back then. It still is today. We see with Kyrie Irving and with anybody that says anything about us being anybody better than a nigga. But how do we identify, I'm pretty sure people are familiar with the prophecies of Deuteronomy 28. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, how we identify who we are as God's people?
Sure. In Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, Moses clearly prophesies to us something that should be very close to our heart, both in the 18th chapter and also in the 28th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses clearly states that what happened to us in Egypt could happen again based on this disobedience. And he gave us also the tools to understand that we are the Hebrew Israelites by telling us how that slavery would come to pass. In other words, because this slavery, he said, made clearly would be done by slave ships, that you would be set up as bondmen and bondwomen, and that you would lose your identity. No man would buy you. No man would claim you as a people and say, give us back. Of course, nowadays we hear about people in Ghana saying, come back to Ghana, but that's really an economic thing. That's not really them saying you are the descendants of us. That's an economic. I apologize for that. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. You understand, like that is out there now, but the reality is at the time and since that time, nobody has ever identified us as their people in Africa. And there's a reason for that, because what's not well known is that the African countries were selling the Hebrew Israelites who had been separated from our identity after the fall of Israel in 70 AD. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm sure we could all follow. So based on that prophecy, Deuteronomy 28, 68 verse, very famous verse in the Bible, hard to deny. Moses clearly said we would go back into these captivities if we broke these laws, statutes, and commandments. And of course, as you read further down in the Bible, you see clearly that the Israelites broke those laws several times and had turned their back on God. I apologize for the alarm. And had turned their back on God. And as a result, the Lord removed us from our land. And in that removal, we would end up back into slavery. And if you look at our captivity today, it is almost a exact copy of the captivity we suffered in ancient Egypt. First of all, America was founded by Freemasons. Freemasonry is the worship or the copying of Egyptian lifestyle down to its belief systems, its gods, all of that. That's why we have a Washington monument that looks like an obelisk. That's why the Lincoln Memorial is copied after a temple to Ramses in Egypt. Excuse me. That's why the ceremonies in Freemasonry are same as the ceremonies in ancient Egypt. You can make the clear comparison that this was the Freemasons' attempt to reestablish another Egypt. And in doing so, they knew they needed slaves, which is why they opened up to the transatlantic slave trade and began to bring slaves to the United States. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. They also knew that the people in the Caribbean and South America were also the 12 lost tribes. They knew that from the explorers who came in the 15th century. And even Columbus wrote about how these people were just like those that he read about that were the original Hebrew Israelites. He was sent over here in the first place not to find India anyway. He was sent to this area because they were looking for these lost 12 tribes. It was looking, the Roman Catholic Church, which is really the church of Satan, was looking for these 12 tribes so they could re-enslave them the way they had them the first time, because they knew wherever they were in the world, they would, become the greatest people in the world and would destroy all the empires in the world. So they were doing that. They were looking to do that anyway. The Freemasons are the ones that actually were able to bring it into fruition once they became, even before they became liberated from England. So so understanding Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, brings us to the understanding of slavery. Also adding Jeremiah, the 14th chapter and the 2nd verse also gives us some of the identity of the color. For a long time in churches, we were told that the Bible has there's nowhere in the Bible that actually describes the color or anything about the people of the Bible. We find out now that was a huge lie. The book Daniel has described Jesus Christ in the Bible before his coming as being a man that had brown skin, burnished brass skin. John the Revelator spoke in the first chapter, Revelations, about Jesus Christ being a dark-skinned man with skin that looked like it burned in the fire. King Solomon, on several occasions in the Songs of Solomon, mentioned the different variations of Black people and their color. So with these scriptures, we find the foundation of who and where these people should be located at.
Mm-hmm.
Another major part to the puzzle is Genesis, the 49th chapter. In Genesis, the 49th chapter, before his death, the patriarch Jacob explained, you understand, to Israel, to his 12 sons, what would befall them in the latter days. And those prophecies have come to pass today and have identified those people living in Central and South America. And this is the basis of where we bring, the knowledge back out of who these 12 tribes are. So just to give you an idea of what it is that how Hebrew Israelites have come to this conclusion.
Okay.
Over so much time and research.
Okay.
And then there's a whole nother European aspect as well. If I could really quick, the Stuart family, of which King James came from, okay, and namely his foot soldiers called the Jacobites, who we went to Edinburgh Castle to examine for ourselves in Scotland, were in fact black people. And these black people were also involved in the transatlantic slave trade and were heavily involved in King James himself in giving an English translation of the Bible in defiance of the very same Roman Catholic Church who has been trying to take control of the religion of Christianity for thousands of years now. So he was instrumental in that, being a black man, and the Jacobites, who were also black people.
That's some amazing history you just dropped down. You just put down. And that's why I feel is, we as a people, we need to dig deep and get back into, digging those records up and looking at the history, because even other groups say that they don't forget their history. And so we need to re-examine, the things that we've been told, the lies that we have been told through the educational system. And just me from a personal standpoint, when you start to do that, you start to uncover a lot of things that you never knew were true. And I thank the ISUPK. I thank you and all the generals and all the brothers for, opening my eyes to something that was bigger than what I could ever imagine as far as what Black people's identity was. Now, I want to get to what I want to ask also is this. Now that this truth has come out and brothers are pushing this truth that Black and brown people are God's chosen people, why is it so hard for Black people to accept that they are in fact God's chosen people? Is it because of the way the Christian church has ruled? Is it the things that they see in the Christian church? Is it because a lot of Black people say, I can't believe in the Bible. They use that book to enslave us. But what I see is that when you're telling the people that they're the greatest people on the earth and, that God is their God and, God is Black, why is it so hard, in your opinion, sir, for our people to accept that?
Well, historically, when you read throughout the Bible, we have always rebelled against God. we have a rich history of not doing what God said. We have a rich history of always loving the other nations and the gods of the other nations. That's been our life. Now, on top of that, there's been a very, very strong and abusive campaign against us when it comes to the Bible. Those that say that's the book they use to enslave us are partly right, because the Christians who were early settlers and enslavers of us, you often use the Bible in a twisted way, to dehumanize us, to show us that they were the humans and we were not, to show us that they were the righteous and we were not. Well, a famous part, of course, is the Book of Mormons, which is a fake book believed by the Mormon Church and many Christians, in which they clearly state that Black people were cursed based on not involving themselves in some fictitious war between the angels and man, which was ridiculous. And so it was stories and books like that and the torture and brutality of slavery that gave us a picture that made us want to not touch the book. What we need to do is re-look at it and re-look and re-examine the fact that it was used against us, because it was the best way for us to never find out that it was us in the book in the first place. And then we had a second revival of that behavior later on in the early 60s by the hand of Black Muslims. When Black Islam came on the scene in the late 50s and early 60s, they were in a constant battle with the white Jews. Them taking on the Arab way of life made them have affinity with the Arabs who were fighting the white Jews. So they took up that mantle as though Judaism was some evil thing, as though the Bible was some evil thing. And, many of those stories, the crazy stories, Jacob was called Yaku, and he was a big-headed scientist that created the white man in a laboratory.
I've heard
and
that.
different. I'm sure you heard many of those type of stories. Those stories came out of Black Islam. And so Black people as a whole became anti-Jewish, anti-being a Jew, not knowing that they were the Jews. And so now, then when the 70s came around, the 80s came around, it was like you had to go back and tell the very people who were taught that being a Jew was the worst fake religion you could ever be, that they were in fact actually the Jews. And so in doing so, you almost gave them a mindset like you're nothing again. And so in their mind, they rejected it, not realizing that they were not only the Jews, but the greatest people ever to walk the face of the earth, and that they were, and because they were so great, through the grace and mercy of the Lord, they became his chosen people. And so that's the history of fighting against it. And of course, the Roman Catholic Church, under any circumstance, would never want Black people to find out that they were the real Hebrew Israelites, because then they would go into the Catholic Church's history, the records, the archives that they had, and find out all of the evil, torturous things they did. The Catholic Church knew that the North American Indians were descendants of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. They made it their business to set up schools to re-educate North American Indian children, which in essence were torture chambers and brainwashing chambers. Recently, they came out and showed the electric chairs, the mini electric chairs that they had created to electrocute children and bury them. All over the world, there are huge grave sites on the lands of Roman Catholic churches from the people that they tortured and murdered and killed all over the world. And those type of things were done to make sure that we never got it in our mind that we were these people in the Bible and would return. But in fact, of course, here we are, hated as we could possibly be, because we found our way back home.
Right. That's excellent. Also, I might add that what you were saying about the boarding schools, I believe it was in Canada, where they have dug up numerous mass graves of children from those boarding schools, where they were abusing those children, beating them to death. Horrible stories where you could talk to Native Indians today, and they can't barely talk without crying about the memories of them being beat for speaking their native tongue, to the point where a lot of them forgot their native tongue.
And we haven't even dug into Central and South America, where the Spaniards and the conquistadors and those, what has gone on down there was going to be a nightmare it finally comes to fruition and be brought out in the open, because they have the records. And the Roman Catholic Church, up to recently, right before the Pope that's in office now, rumors swelled around, how they use their version of the CIA, the Jesuit priests, to do unspeakable horrors in Central and South America.
Wow. Yeah. So when it comes to our people, what are your thoughts on our people? We've been voting for over 100 years plus. We've been voting and looking for an answer through voting. What are your thoughts on that? Even with this election coming up, with Black people looking at Trump and saying, I'm not for Trump, I want Kamala Harris, and thinking that real change is going to come. Real change will finally come in our communities.
I'm glad you brought that point up. And the reason I'm so glad you brought this point up is because learning the truth about voting from the Bible is one of my personal thanks to God. The Lord, through mercy, has given us the inside track and understanding of voting. And I've always been thankful for it, and I'll explain. In the Bible, God said that we could not put anybody over us, as you know, who is not chosen one by the Lord and is one that is not our people. It's against God's law to put somebody over us that's not the Lord's people. The Lord never intended for us to ever be in slavery. So voting for anybody who's not us is in essence breaking God's law. So if Black people understood that, none of us would vote unless it was an actual Black person whom God chose through the priest to be on that position that the person is running for. If we were to adopt that policy, just that policy alone from the Lord, we would have the greatest leaders that we could ever have over us. Now, they may not be over everybody else, but they would be over us, and they would care about, for real, about our life and our intentions. Now, with that said, let's talk about the modern day voting system in America. Knowing that pitfall that God protected us from, when we come up to today and we look at today's standard, first of all, Kamala Harris, first of all, for those that may not know out there, the father carries the bloodline, meaning what you are is what your father was. If your father was a white man, you're a white man. I don't care how dark your skin is. If a white man marries a Black woman and they have a chocolate colored child, that child is still considered an Edomite or a white person, because what your father is, that's what God identifies you from. He doesn't identify you by color. That's a big misconception. He identifies you by your bloodline. So with that being said, Kamala Harris is not one of us. It's illegal for us to vote for her. Donald Trump is obviously not one of us. It's illegal for us to vote for him. Barack Obama was not one of us. His father was an African and not from the 12 tribes of Israel. It's illegal for us to vote for him. And once again, the draw to vote, to believe that we're making a change, is extremely strong. The campaign is extremely strong. I get it. I understand why people are drawn to it and want to participate. But thanks be to the Lord, he gave us those scriptures to make sure that we didn't vote for the wrong person. We could vote, but we better vote according to what the Lord says, not vote according to how we feel. That's not how it works. Instead, we vote according to how we feel, and then all those that are in power have to do is spend enough money to convince you to vote for one of them, since you're voting how you feel instead of the way God said to vote. And so, as a result, all we do is vote for people who have received enough money from the rich to get in office. That's why you hear so much about these politicians fighting campaigns to raise money. Because in other words, if enough rich people give you enough money, you can convince the masses with social media and television and radio, and then you get put in office. But here's the problem with that. When you get put in office off of all the money you raise from the rich, who are you going to tend to when you get in office? You're certainly not going to stop the rich from taking the money from the poor. The rich is who got you in office. So whether you be Democrat or Republican, you're gonna help the rich out, because the rich is who got you in office, and the rich is who's going to keep you in office when the vote comes up again. So that goes for your senators, your Congress people, and definitely for your presidential candidate. Presidential candidates are picked from a variety of rich groups and rich secret organizations and wealthy bankers. They decide. So the people always lose. And so it is almost foolish to think that life would change because you vote in an American election. It is such a lie, and it's such a brainwashing. And the part of what ties us to it so horribly is, is Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King fought tooth and nail, him and his men, for voting rights. And eventually we got voting rights, but we got something else with voting rights. Once we got the voting rights, the CIA decided to pour millions of dollars worth of heroin into the Black community. So we got the right to vote, but then they said, well, we'll dope them up so they can't vote anyway. And then they just began to incarcerate us en masse so that you would lose your right to vote by being incarcerated, which they really proliferated in the 70s under Bill Clinton, 70s, 80s-ish, under Bill Clinton. So even if you get the right to vote and you want to go and vote, there are billion-dollar campaigns to destroy the Black vote by incarceration, by all of these means. They wipe out your ability to vote in mass to change something anyway, which is why it's such a foolish idea. Martin Luther King fought for it. It was one of several of his great errors in pushing us towards trying to join a system that was born from a slave master who will never relinquish his authority as a slave.
Yeah.
So
if I could,
please,
let me just add, what you just said is so correct. Whereas I said to myself, I said, why would even through the political system, the voting system, why would these people allow us who were once the slave to get up high in their system and start telling them how to live and start making laws and legislation and have the power to change their life? Why would they ever allow us to do that? They will never allow us to do that. And to your point, going back a little bit about the rich people that fund these campaigns. I was speaking to photographer, journalist, historian Chester Higgins, and he was saying that our people are focused on entertainment and not, whether it be the music business or whatever business, we're focused on the entertainment. And so because we're focused on the entertainment, it goes back to what you just said, is they have the money to pay off any entertainer, any Puff Diddy, any Megan Thee Stallion, any Cardi B, and put in front of your face to sway you to vote for that candidate.
Vote or die.
Vote or die.
It was like you had no choice. It was like a matter of life and death. And I particularly remember me and my soldiers being out in Washington, D.C. right before the Barack Obama vote. There's plenty of videos of it on YouTube. And the vitriolic hatred that Black people had against us for speaking out against Barack Obama. It was like we were doing the evilest thing in the world. Black people cried when Barack Obama got into office. Black people really believed that their lives would change. I remember I've heard so many stories of brothers and sisters saying how they sat on the couch and cried when he won that election. Because to us, it was in our weakened state, in our ignorant state. To us, it was as though we had finally overcome. We had finally put Black people in charge, when in fact, we never put a Black person in charge. We put an African in charge from the descendants of the people who sold us in the first place. Second of all, when he got in office, he proved that that his job was not to take care of the poor. When the crisis came, when the financial crisis came, he bailed out Wall Street. He bailed out IG. He bailed out, he created the TARP program. He created some of those other programs. He also sold us over to Wall Street in the medical industry. Everybody fell in love with Obamacare, when in fact, Obamacare now is robbing all the middle class to the tunes of, $800, $900, $1,000 a month for their health care. So these are all done for the rich and the wealthy and the powerful. And us in our ignorance, thanks be to the Lord that I give us this. We're a people that we stay on something and we stick on something. Like we went into that voting with Martin Luther King in the 60s, and here we are 60 years later. We still trying to hold on to Martin's dream that we're going to go in there and vote and make some kind of change. And, you know, I give it to us in our heart, but it's a dumb, ignorant, stupid idea. What we need to do is come together as a people and make decisions that's best for us. Only problem with that is that angers the slave master. The slave master doesn't want you to not. It wasn't Martin Luther King's idea to join us to white people. It was white people's idea. They were smart enough to know that if we continue with this separation from black people, that black people will begin to take care of themselves and they'll become stronger. And what we'll have eventually in America is a split America. We'll have a black America and a white America. The only problem is black America will be just as strong as white America. So what do? We bring them together, and then we make sure that they never become as strong as us. And here we are today. We've been together with them for 60 years. We went through the civil rights, and now we're in the utter poverty. We're incarcerated en masse. We're on drugs, all kinds of laws to trap us up, like child support laws and different laws. And we're literally on the bottom begging for a job. And he is literally on top of the world, sending billions and billions of dollars to his friends in the Middle East and other places. So their program, this was their program. This wasn't Martin Luther King's program. He was the pawn used. He was the Trojan horse used to drag us into more madness. And here's what's so amazing about it. When I mentioned earlier how Egypt is almost the exact copy of America. In fact, in Egypt, in the book of Exodus, it shows you clearly that the same path that Martin Luther King took is the exact same path that the Egyptians took to get us to join on to them. And the same thing happened 4,000 years ago. They brought us together with them and then made our lives horrible and starved us to death and committed racism against us. Joseph was second in charge of Egypt, and he still suffered racism from the Egyptians.
If I could, when you said it wasn't Martin Luther King that was trying to do that. It was them that was trying to do that bring us together. Well, the proof is in the history, because to this day, they pushed the I Have a Dream speech at the Washington Monument, right? But they never talked about the video where Martin Luther King said out of his own mouth, I feel I have integrated my people into a burning house. Or he says, the dream has become a nightmare.
That's right.
That's right. It's on video, but you never hear that one. But you hear the I have a dream because it goes with what they wanted.
Exactly. And what black people really, really should realize is that black leaders in the past have been commandeered by rich white people to use them against you. Even Malcolm X. Malcolm X and his speeches and his talk was commandeered when necessary to use against us. And the same with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King is the go-to when you rebel against the slave master. Be like Martin Luther King. We all got to get along. We all got to be one. But this oneness is killing us. The oneness is making them rich and great and powerful, but this oneness is killing us because we were never supposed to join them in that way.
Now, moving on, we're going to move on. And you brought out some good points about what we just talked about voting, about Martin Luther King, about the United States wanting us to be joined with them. But moving on to more current events, something that's going on right now. That's the impending war. Iran then shot out some missiles towards Israel. And I want to talk about the possibilities of what could happen, the impending war, and how it will affect Black people here in America, because America is an ally to Israel. So if you could just elaborate on that, sir.
Right. Great point. If I was a Black person in America, which I am, what I would do is be preparing for the day that I'm not going to have any lights in the house. for the day that I'm going to have no electricity in the house, for the day that I'm going to have no water in the house and no food in the house, for the day where my life will be in danger because somebody will want to come in my house and take my life, for the little things that I may have. That's what's coming next. The landscape and technology of today, it means that there is no more a thing called asymmetrical warfare. Today's war will be fought everywhere, no matter who you are, because of the ability for hackers and cyber attacks and things of that nature, and terrorism and the transport of light armored weapons around the world. So what's happening in the Middle East is definitely going to spill into America. In Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, it's prophesied that all nations will be drawn into this Middle East war eventually. I may die down for now, and it'll stir back up later, and it'll die down and stir back up, or the Lord could cut the time short and let it proliferate right now all the way until it turns into a nuclear war. But be rest assured, you just heard Turkey denounce Israel. We just heard Barbados went to the UN and denounced Israel. Other countries are going to eventually join in and denounce Israel. Troops are eventually going to have to be sent there based on Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, to bring them into this valley, and Joel, the 3rd chapter, to bring them into this valley of Jehoshaphat. So everybody will be drawn into this war. And for Blacks and Latinos and Native Indians, it means that you thought you were living bad already. You're about to live a whole lot worse as this goes on. Your way of life is about to go from a first world country and slide in onto a second world country. And if you are not careful, or in time, it'll eventually slide into a third world country. This is the end of America. This is the end of the empire. And not just America, but all the empires around the world. For Christ to rule the world, the empires around the world have to fall. And the way the Lord is bringing them into this fall is drawing them into this Middle East conflict. He's drawing them into this conflict, and he's going to bring this war right on his land. And he's going to use this war to cleanse his land of every nation that has had a part in ruling his land. These nuclear weapons are going to, in fact, level the ground on this country so that it could be built all over again from scratch the right way, and Christ be given the most magnificent kingdom you have ever seen in your entire life or in any history on the face of this earth. That's the plan by God. Man, of course, he has his own agenda. They're all fighting each other. And what's going on as far as man's agenda is simply this, that as we get closer to the end, and as more nations gain power, they're sizing themselves up. China, Russia, and Iran are allies. Russia needs Iran for oil. Iran needs Russia for weapons. So they're joined together. America needs Israel to control the countries in the Middle East so that they can control their oil. Israel's their backup card so that they can control the Middle East oil as well. Make no mistake, this ain't about philosophies. This ain't about nothing that they say it's about. It's about one thing and one thing only: oil. Arabs are dying in the Middle East simply because if you dig down underneath their feet, you're going to find some black gold called oil. And because of it, the beast of the earth, this so-called white man and all his families, they want it. They want to eat it all. They want control of it all. And they will fight tooth and nail like any bully. They will fight tooth and nail to get it, to control it, and to keep the status quo on all sides. So what's happening now is America, Israel, and their allies in Europe have teamed up, and so has Russia, Syria, China, several of the African countries. All of this can be found in Ezekiel, the 38th chapter. And they'll now unify on both sides of the table, and they will build up arms, and they're building new weapons. They said Russia just came out with a new weapon called a glide bomb, some low-tech, inexpensive bomb that could blow up tanks. And so now they're sliding these weapons in and killing people with these weapons. Others are creating new weapons. Other smaller countries are creating new ways to hack and break in. Recently, in the last couple of days, they broke into the phone systems in the United States, not the cell phones, but the regular network phones. They broke into those phones. They're going to break into other things in all these countries. Every country has a cyber warfare team now. It's part of their military. Every one of them have it. They have a building with 100, 200 people in it. Everybody's got a computer desk. They're online all around the clock, and they're all attacking each other, stealing secrets, stealing weapons, destroying infrastructure. That's what's going on. And it's going to escalate on until it gets to the point of a nuclear weapon. A great sign to look for is how hard their hearts are. Remember when God went to destroy Egypt, he said, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh resisted the Lord and resisted what the prophet said, Moses said. And as a result of it, he destroyed his entire country. As you see Netanyahu become more defiant, as you see the Arab world become more defiant, if you see America become more defiant, know that these are signs that these countries are going to be destroyed. Here's the next, real quick, here's the next sign that we're looking for. We're looking for to see the invasion of Saudi Arabia. Be prepared. That one is coming too. And once they retaliate and bomb Iran, then Saudi Arabia will come into play as whether or not they will go in there and invade Saudi Arabia. It is a biblical prophecy. It's going to happen. And a little more of this, and they will shut down the Straits of Hormuz. If they close the Straits of Hormuz totally, that means that almost no oil will be leaving up out of there. And brother, the world is going to change overnight because these militaries at war are not going to give us gas for our cars when they need jet fuel to get all the way across the world to fight their enemies. So it was going to be a very different landscape very soon. And and nobody should feel bad. This is not as a downer. This is a blessing in that the Lord said, when you see these things, know that the time is near. It's actually a beautiful thing that this is happening because this means Jesus Christ's kingdom, Yahawashi in the Hebrew, is on its way. And for those that truly serve him, this is what we look for, to know that his kingdom will come and we'll live in a perfect kingdom rather than live in this kingdom that has kept us enslaved for 400 years. Salakia.
Well, well said, General. Well said and explained. That's what I wanted for my viewers to hear and to get the breakdown. Also, you know, we talked about it earlier. All the people that, you know, have no faith in the Bible, they believe different ideologies. What about these prophecies that are coming to pass right before everyone's eyes? You know, well, I guess the Bible was real because all of these prophecies that are happening in the world, you know, these things have been foretold for thousands of years, and they're actually happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like this is the greatest time to be living in and to see these things unfold and to be able to read about them from records of thousands of years ago. You know, the Bible, once again, once the slave master realized that he couldn't keep you from the Bible, the first thing he did was make sure that your first black churches were directly from the Ku Klux Klan. The Baptist Church comes from the Ku Klux Klan, a white supremacist organization. That's why they burn crosses. So as we went into Christianity, through the door of our most vicious slave masters who beat us into a form of Christianity that was healthy for them, not us. And as we went forward to start to study the Bible and study the records to keep us ignorant and blind, they introduced so much music and dance. And then the Bible then became almost like a little Sunday morning concert. And in doing so, they kept us distracted. And now, as we go on into the future to keep us further distracted, they're using the black church to bring forth as much of a alternative lifestyle as they can. They're bringing in the LGBTQ as becoming a haven in the Christian church. And that's another distraction to keep us from becoming who we are. And that's why those men who founded the Israelite School of UPK, who decided to just look at the records and only go by the records that they were reading and not be influenced by outside influences, whether it be white Jews, black Muslims, white Christians, or whatever, found their way to understanding that we were the real Jews. And we need to go back to that and get away from that so that we would know what it is that we should be doing in these last days. And it would help us so much. This Bible is an amazing black person's book. It tells you that Moses was black when he put his hand in his bosom and took it out. Tells you that Jesus Christ was black. Jeremiah describes himself as being black. It tells you that this is our records. And that's where we should be focused on, not singing and dancing and whether or not a man could have sex with another man and a woman with another woman, when it was clear in the Bible in Leviticus 19, 20th chapter, that's against God's lifestyle.
Right.
And once again, we have a history of being against God's lifestyle when we need to be for his lifestyle.
So, I mean, listen, this has been amazing, Commander General YAHANNA.
I
hope we can do this again.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, yes, indeed. No sweat. Listen, I got some history that I want to bring out with you that I'm sure that you would love when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade, when it comes to West Africa and our identity. And hopefully we can, put something together, which would be awesome for brothers and sisters. Also, when we get off, you can send me your information. I got some shirts for you too.
Oh, no, I like a good shirt.
Yeah, I got some shirts for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I hope everybody that was in this live was able to suck up, the information that was just put down. And that's another thing I was going to say before we get off. When it comes to this, what could happen with this war is that we live in our reality is very fragile.
Yes, it is.
In America, we think we're going to get up and turn on the television and go to work and drive here and drive there and get on social media. But all of that can be over in the blink of an eye. Am I correct, sir?
You're absolutely correct. And we should almost expect it. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but we should expect it to happen. We should be in the mindset like it could happen. You need to ask yourself if that type of situation was created, how would I survive? What would I eat? How would I raise funds for myself? What would I actually do? What would I do with my family and extended family? Where would I go? How could I get food? What would be a way to get food? The Israelite School of UPK is focused on those things. Yeah, in great detail around the world, in every location that we're at. And so the same also, every brother and sister should focus on. Many of us won't, and we're going to pay the price for it. You know what I mean? We're going to pay the price. When God came for the children of Israel to take them out of Egypt, he gave the word one day ahead. He sent the death angel, and he told Moses right before he sent that death angel, he told Moses that he would have the Egyptians release the children of Israel out of slavery the following day. And sure enough, when that death angel came through and killed the firstborn of every single Egyptian, the cry went out so great that they rushed us out of the country because they didn't know what God was going to do next.
There you have it. There you have it. For brothers and sisters in here, I hope you received that information, got that information, and take it to heart. Like, take it to heart. Like, I did this because I know a lot of people need to hear it. And so once again, I want to thank you, Commander General YAHANNA, for giving me the opportunity. I
appreciate it. You bringing me on.
Look, anytime. So we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up. Any last words, General? Anything you want to say? Any plugs? I got your tags down there on the bottom of the screen, but anything that I don't know that you want to speak on?
Okay. Do you have the website down there?
Yes, the website is down there with the Monday night class on Monday night. I'm sorry,
Right.
the radio show. I'm
The
sorry.
radio show on Monday
Radio.
night. Yeah, we're on Black Watch every
Yeah.
Monday night, 9 p.m.
Yes.
Address in the description below. I always ask everybody, please pay your tithe. We're self-funded. We need the funds all the time. I'm always on the campaign to raise funds. As all nonprofit organizations know, you have to constantly press to get funds to make sure that your organization can uh, build their budget for the following year. So I ask everybody, go on isubk.com, hit the tithes and donations button, send us some funds, man, support these brothers. I brought thousands of young men out of the streets, out of prison, out of dark places, and I've turned them into priests. I sometimes look at the tapes of them and say, I can't believe that the Lord used me to do that. It wasn't me, but it was the Lord that did it. And for me to see young, strong warriors who would otherwise be selling drugs, robbing, and killing come back to their sensible mind and instead become priests of the Lord and wake up other brothers. We can start a virus of righteousness among Black people that just changes our landscape. So I ask everybody, please support us and send us some funds. The Lord said in the Bible to pay 10% of your earnings. Support us with that because it changes a whole lot in the work of the Lord. We're reaching into Haiti now, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Brazil, other countries, the Caribbean islands, of course, in Europe. We're breaking into Europe as well, in England, in different areas. We got a lot more territory. The world's a big place. We got a lot of territory to cover. So please support us. Just want to add that if I could.
And if I could add also on top of what you just said is that me, myself, I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for the ISUPK. Like the general said, I'd probably be in prison, which I have been in prison before, selling drugs, or in the grave. And
That's right.
without the truth, you don't get Black Authentic Truth. You don't get me in this form that you see me as today. Without the ISUPK, without Commander General YAHANNA, and with all the generals, the captains, the officers, and all the sisters, you don't get me in this form. You don't even get me on a platform. I wouldn't even be here. So
right. You and me both, trust me. You and me both.
To the point you just made, sir, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, very heavy, brother. And the water for those kind words too. Appreciate that.
Yeah, the water for you, sir. And I guess we're gonna get back. We're gonna get it again. We're gonna do something again in the near future.
Definitely. I'm sorry I didn't make it out to California this year, but Lord allow, I'll get out there soon.
You know you was missed.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I wanted to go. I was fighting back and forth with it. I was telling the generals, man, I need to go, but I got to do this and da. Eventually, those other things won out, but I've gone most of every year before that. So we'll be back on it too, because I definitely want to come out there. And maybe I'll come out there on an off time just to come hang, man, maybe teach some classes out there with y'all, San Bernardino, Hollywood, all the different places y'all getting it in on, you know what I mean? Vegas. You know what I mean? That type of thing, man. Beautiful, wonderful, powerful brothers and sisters y'all got going on out there. You know what I mean? It's very humbling experience, man, to see the work y'all doing all the way on the other side of the country. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting in there. Salakia, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying, and you know, thanking you for those kind words. Yeah. So until next time, we'll do something. We'll put something together, and also, yeah, that would be nice. Also, if you came out here, but however we can do it online. We can do it in person. I want to get with you and do more of this type of these type of breakdowns and just talk about the history of our people.
Absolutely.
All
I salute you, warrior.
Salute you, sir. Shalom, Yahweh Shalom.
What again?
Yana bar, and I'm gonna stay on. I'm gonna just put you to the okay. There you have it, right? Commanding General YAHANNA slid through, dropped some heavy knowledge, some history on Hebrew Israelites. We talked about, you know, some of the things that our people deal with, voting, the impending war, something that we all should be looking for. So what's y'all thoughts? What's y'all thoughts on what we just talked about? Make sure y'all share this video. Share this video. I'm gonna stay on live for a little more. I see some people dropping out. Oh, you came to see Commander Jenny YAHANNA. Listen, I'm not mad at you. I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you. Yeah, man. So that's what I want to do. I want to, you know, talk to people, talk to brothers, prominent men I see in the community doing things, making moves. I'm reaching out to a lot of people. Y'all gonna be surprised at some of the people I'm reaching out. I'm sure a lot of people are surprised at that right there. That conversation with Commander Jenny YAHANNA. You didn't see it coming, did you? But that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do and change, evolve on this platform. You know, not just, you know, blogging, not just, historical videos, but actual real conversations with real people who have real life experience in helping their community and doing great things in the community. So, yeah, there was something I wanted to talk about, but I guess I'll save it because I got about an hour before I got to get to the slave. I'll save it for next Sunday. I got about an hour to get to that slavery. You know, that slavery. And yeah, get ready for work. Get ready for work. But I'm glad I was able to get this in. I reached out to the brother, like I said, the brother in North Carolina, Taylor House Publishing, the brother that's been doing great work, groundwork on the Javion McGee story, getting a lot of information out. I haven't received anything back. Let me check it while I'm on live. I don't want to speak prematurely. Let me see, because it's been a few hours. Let me see if anybody hit me. Yeah, brother hasn't hit me back, but you know, I'll be reaching out to different people, different well-known names, and just seeing where we can go, what we can do, what type of conversation we can have on particular issues that deal with Black people and things that we need to pay attention to. I think one of the most important things that we should be paying attention to is what we talked about, is the fact of what is our identity first, but also what's going on in the world. I know life can get hard for us. Things can be really rough to where we don't even care what is going on outside of what's going on in our own life. You know, a lot of us are dealing with, you know, how to pay our rent. Just the simple things in life could have us stressed out to where we're not even paying attention to the bigger world. And that thing could really jump off. And if it jumps off, you ain't gonna just be trying to buy toilet paper. It ain't gonna be a thing like COVID-19. It's gonna be 4 times worse, 5 times worse than that. We're talking about the fall of the economy, and then all the things that come with lawlessness, not having even no rule of law. And so are you going to be prepared for that? These are things that you need to think about. But I'm about to get up out of here, y'all. Let me see. Let me give y'all some shout outs. Everybody that rocked in this live. This was an unexpected live. I mean, for the people, but I knew a few days ago that I was going to do it. Shout out to you, Karl Mazbaf. Shout out to you, Amara. Shout out to you, Barathanawa. Shout out to you, Renee Gaines. Shout out to you, Toshiba. Shout out to you, Maccabia. Shout out to you, Young Man Kev. Shout out to you, Shadow Rock. Shout out to you, Nico Ray. Yeah, and I'm about to get up out of here, y'all. Y'all stay safe. Y'all stay out of trouble. And always keep it Black and authentic.